We had an issue today from a friend, and she was having challenges in adapting complex designs created in other software programs for use inside of Design Space. So I put together a little thing to help along, so we will talk about that in this podcast. This is a Creative Crafters podcast. Hi, I'm Bette from Bette's Makes, and this is your questions answered. So the question is challenges in adapting complex designs created in other software for use inside of Design Space. Now, there's a number of things that come to mind, of course, is the file compatibility is the first one. And many design programs allow for intricate designs. It's just how they slice them up when they save them as SVG files. So compatibility issues arise when importing them into Design Space if they are not sliced up properly as an SVG file in the original program. Sometimes it requires simplification or conversion of the file formats, but if you've purchased it or downloaded that, that should not be your issue. That comes from the designer. So let's think about that a little bit is file compatibility. Basically, you want SVG files. If you're going to tear them apart and take those vector graphics and change them somewhat. If you're using PNG files, there is not an issue. A PNG file is a PNG file. Now, we talked a little bit about the limitations of Design Space and constraints on layers and complexity. So complex designs may need to be broken down or adapted. Now, what I mean by that is when you bring an SVG file into Design Space, what you should do is go down the layers panel and just see if things are grouped together and what's grouped and what's not. Sometimes there are so many parts and pieces, you may feel that it's not worth the issue. But if you ungroup things and then move them around on the screen so you have exactly what you want, and then group those little pieces together, it is a little easier to handle. Now, the problem could be precision and scale and maintaining the size and proportions, and that detail can be a bit challenging, but quite often when I purchase an SVG or download one, it will come in like 30 inches wide and 60 inches deep because that's how the designer made those files. Now, what I have to do when I'm doing my design, I will bring them into something like Illustrator and then I will shrink them down to approximately 825 pixels maximum so that when you bring them in, there's nothing else to do. But quite often you will get SVG files that are ginormous. So what you have to do is bring them in one at a time, go up to the sizing, and then take a look at the two sizing. They will be huge. Take the biggest one and change it to 11 inches, and then it will all shrink down and you should be able to handle it a little better there. Now, intricate details mentioned in the question is fine lines and small details may not cut well. Well, they should, and those fine lines and details are not a symptom of the imported design, but a symptom of perhaps your mat or your blade, because an SVG file that is set to cut on a certain point will cut. So that is another issue altogether. And I know the learning curve is huge on these, but bringing them in when they are giant, shrink them down to something more manageable, and then ungroup them because likely they are all ungrouped, and then just group things together that you're working on. So basically the solution here is patience, persistence, and experimentation. And I know that doesn't help a lot, but I know that you can persist and these little tips will work for you. This has been the Creative Crafters podcast and your questions answered.